Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're mapping out a sprawling, highly controversial conspiracy theory presented across a series of source videos. What we're looking at is essentially an attempt to construct a grand, unified theory of history, one that completely blends theology, true crime, and modern geopolitics into one giant narrative. We're going straight to the source material to neutrally unpack these incredibly charged claims, and through some incredibly detailed, dynamic motion graphics, we are going to visually trace this massive web. Because honestly, to even begin to understand a conspiracy theory of this magnitude, you really need to see how all these complex threads connect. Let's jump right in. So, to make sense of this massive web, we're breaking this explainer down into 6 parts: ancient sun worship traditions, pagan tropes in Christianity, the cult of Baal, the global satanic panic, elites and secret societies, and finally, geopolitics and the Antichrist. Starting right off with part 1, ancient sun worship traditions. The foundational idea here, the literal starting point of this whole theory, is that ancient pagan sun worship didn't just disappear over time. Instead, the source argues it just kind of went underground, constantly changing its name and adapting as it infiltrated different cultures throughout human history. And it's wild how this plays out when we look at the specific deities. The creator is connecting dots across completely different eras. We're talking Tammuz in Babylon, Mithras in Rome, Osiris in Egypt, Shiva in India, all the way to the modern occult figure of Baphomet. The argument here? There is no such thing as separate mythological figures. According to the source, these are all just continuous manifestations of one single horned sun god, worshipped by secretive mystery religions. Now, the absolute engine driving this whole historical narrative is a concept called syncretism. Basically, syncretism is the blending together of different religions or cultures. And the source argues that practitioners of this ancient mystery religion used syncretism like a stealth tactic. By merging their sun deity with whatever local gods they encountered, they could adapt, survive, and basically quietly infiltrate new populations without ever getting caught. All right, moving on to part 2, pagan tropes in Christianity. And fair warning, this brings us to some of the source's most highly controversial claims. The assertion here is that early Roman Christianity fundamentally absorbed these exact ancient sun worship practices. The claim is that during the Council of Nicaea, early Christian practices were deliberately altered to appease pagan populations. According to the source video, the traditional Sabbath replaced with Sunday, literally, the day of the sun. The source also points to churches being built facing east toward the sunrise, the round Catholic Eucharist being designed to mimic a solar disk, and even aligning Jesus' birth with pagan winter solstice festivals like Saturnalia on December 25th or Ion on January 6th. They claim these are all direct remnants of that ancient sun cult. And honestly, the sheer level of detail this conspiracy theory attempts to weave together is staggering. The creator pulls from 19th and 20th century scholars, people like James Frazer, who wrote The Golden Bough, and Max Mueller. They use these sources to argue that even the holy Christian halo and those circular tonsure haircuts you see on medieval monks, they claim those were originally meant to represent solar disks, like a secret, hidden homage to the sun god. Which brings us to part 3, the cult of Baal. Now, we are definitely transitioning into much darker territory here. The source takes all these ancient theological claims and connects them directly to the biblical cult of Baal, bringing in some truly horrific historical allegations along the way. The theory alleges that Baal worshippers didn't just practice child sacrifice, but that they infiltrated society at the very highest levels. To back this up, the creator points to medieval European blood libels, specifically cases like William of Norwich in 1144 and Simon of Trent in 1475. Now, historically, these are widely recognized as horrific myths, but the source makes the highly controversial leap of framing them as factual events. They claim these were actual instances of Baal worshippers getting caught and that corrupted institutions just covered it all up later. So that really begs the question, right? How exactly does this grand unified theory bridge the massive gap from the ancient ruins of Babylon or medieval Europe all the way to our modern, hyper-connected Western world? Well, that brings us to part 4, the global satanic panic. Because according to the source, the answer to that question lies squarely in the late 20th century. This is the exact moment when these ancient narratives seemingly exploded onto modern television screens, bringing the conspiracy theory right into people's living rooms. The source leans really heavily on the 1980s satanic panic. They thread together things like the 1980 publication of Michelle Remembers, the incredibly publicized McMartin preschool trials in '83, and sensational daytime TV moments, like when a woman named Rachel, later known as Vicky Poland, went on the Oprah Winfrey Show claiming her family practiced elite ritual sacrifice. The video presents these media touchstones not as mass hysteria, but as actual suppressed proof that this ancient Baal cult had bubbled right back to the surface in modern America. They even repurpose everyday media from that era. You probably recognize this classic TV PSA. It's 10 p.m., do you know where your children are? Well, the source frames this not as some standard, helpful curfew reminder for parents, but actually as a desperate, thinly veiled warning broadcast to the public because elite occult abductions had reached a literal crisis point. Absolutely wild to think about it that way, but that is exactly how the theory connects the dots. Okay, part 5. Elites and secret societies. So if this cult is real, how do they actually organize and wield power today? Like, practically speaking, how does a secret society control the globe? According to the theory, the mechanics of this global control are super multi-layered. First, the source claims these elites use massive financial manipulation to basically buy institutional influence, citing older conspiracy authors like William Guy Carr. On top of that, the video alleges they use sexual blackmail to completely compromise politicians and celebrities. It claims they organize through insanely exclusive fraternities, specifically pointing fingers at Yale's Skull and Bones, founded back in 1832, and elite gatherings like Bohemian Grove, where they supposedly perform mock sacrifices to a horned deity. To try and anchor these massive, sweeping claims in modern pop culture, the video leans on specific pieces of evidence. It prominently features that infamous 2001 footage of commentator Alex Jones sneaking into Bohemian Grove and filming a cremation ritual. And it even weaves in super recent celebrity anecdotes, like social media posts from boxer Ryan Garcia. The overarching argument is that whenever a public figure tries to speak out against these societies, they are deliberately silenced or smeared by the media machine. And finally, we arrive at part 6, geopolitics and the Antichrist. This is the grand, sweeping conclusion of the source's narrative. This is where the conspiracy scales all the way up from secretive billionaire clubs to massive global geopolitics. The video identifies an overarching Dajjal or Antichrist figure that is supposedly leading this ancient cult, but the creator takes it a massive step further, claiming this figure literally takes physical form in modern monuments. Specifically, the source claims that the Statue of Liberty is not a symbol of freedom at all. Instead, they argue it's a massive modern representation of that same androgynous ancient horned deity, basically the ultimate idol of the Dajjal sitting right in New York Harbor. And this whole thing culminates in a highly charged geopolitical climax. The source video neutrally analyzes a piece of Iranian media, a CGI clip showing a missile striking the Statue of Liberty. But the creator actually celebrates this imagery, making the wild claim that the tablet the statue holds isn't the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution, but actually the Babylonian Talmud. So here, the source is framing modern Middle Eastern conflicts not as traditional political disputes over land or resources, but literally as a direct, modern-day spiritual war against an ancient occult force. 3,000+ years. That is the sheer massive scope of human history this conspiracy theory attempts to compress into one giant syncretic puzzle. It is literally drawing a straight line from ancient Babylonian ruins right up to CGI missiles in modern geopolitical propaganda. Which leaves us with a final thought for this explainer. When you watch these incredibly detailed motion graphics connect all the dots, stringing together ancient theology, medieval panic, and modern-day geopolitics, you really have to stop and ask yourself, when historical syncretism is blended with modern anxieties, at what point does history end and modern mythology begin? It's a truly fascinating look at how human beings try to make sense of a chaotic world by finding patterns, even if they have to invent the threads to tie them all together. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive.